They're moving again, Trazax announced, his four eyes blinking rapidly as he studied the glowing display in the war room. Commander Vorla leaned forward, the blue light reflecting off her scaled skin. "Where this time?" she asked. "The Centauri system," Trazax replied, zooming in on a planet that had been empty until recently. "They've already set up landing zones on the northern continent and begun atmospheric conversion." A low sound rumbled from him, a Zalaxian noise that carried both frustration and fear. "How many colonists?" "Initial scans show about 10,000, typical human settlement pattern." The commander rose to her full height, all 7 feet of her casting a long shadow over the tactical table. "There's nothing typical about human settlements, Trazax. You'd do well to remember that." I watched the exchange with unease. As the newest xenobiologist assigned to the Galactic Defense Coalition, I was still struggling to adjust to military life. "My name is Nefari. Until 6 solar cycles ago, I was peacefully studying exotic plant life in the Outer Rim. Now I found myself aboard the GDC flagship Inevitable Justice, studying the most dangerous species in the known universe. Humans." "Officer Nefari," Commander Vorla said suddenly, turning to me. "You've studied their expansion patterns. What's your assessment?" I cleared my throat, a nervous tic I'd picked up from watching too many human broadcasts. "The Centauri system offers abundant water, stable gravity, and mineral deposits comparable to their homeworld. It matches their usual colonization criteria." Vorla's expression darkened. "I didn't ask for a real estate report. I need to know their strategic intent." "With respect, Commander," I said carefully, trying to steady my voice, "understanding their environmental choices is key to predicting their behavior. Humans don't just colonize for strategy. They do it because, well, they simply can't stop themselves." Trazax gave a sharp snort, dismissing me. "They're not some unstoppable force of nature, Nefari. They're just persistent pests." Vorla cut him a sharp glance. "Persistent pests that have beaten every containment plan we've put in place. Don't underestimate them, Lieutenant." The briefing moved on as officers reported human activity in other sectors. I stayed quiet, studying the hologram of the new colony. Something about its design bothered me. It wasn't their usual pattern. The layout looked defensive. After the meeting, I approached Commander Vorla privately. "Commander, may I speak freely?" She nodded, already half distracted by other matters. "The Centauri colony isn't a standard settlement. The layout suggests they're expecting resistance. I think they know we're watching." That got her full attention. "Explain." I showed her the scans on my datapad. "See here? These buildings create overlapping fields of fire, and these larger ones on the perimeter, they likely house defense systems, based on past encounters." Vorla narrowed her eyes. "And how would you advise we proceed?" "Send me down there," I said, surprising even myself. "Excuse me?" "I mean, with the observation team. I've spent years studying human behavior. I might catch things others would overlook." She studied me in silence for a long moment, and "Very well. You'll join Captain Drell's unit. Departure in 6 hours. Don't make me regret this, Nefari." I wouldn't. I couldn't. Being the only civilian scientist on a warship was already a fragile position, caught between two worlds, much like the humans themselves. 6 hours later, I was aboard a stealth shuttle heading toward the Centauri colony with Captain Drell and 5 elite recon soldiers. Drell was a Valyrian, known across the galaxy for their tactical genius and total lack of humor. His pale blue skin was almost translucent, with veins visible beneath the surface. He looked at me with open skepticism. "Commander Vorla says you're an expert on humans," he said flatly. "I've studied them extensively," I replied, trying to sound more confident than I felt. "Studying and surviving are not the same," he said. "My team has faced humans before, have you?" I hesitated. "Only in controlled settings." His soldiers exchanged knowing glances. "Then stay close and follow orders," Drell said. Humans may look like other bipeds, but they're unpredictable in ways you cannot train for. One of the soldiers, a strong female named Zevik, leaned forward. During the Proxima incident, I saw a human lift an entire transport vehicle to save his trapped companion. Their strength spikes when their pack is in danger. Another soldier nodded. And they don't feel pain like we do. I shot one 3 times in a border fight. He kept fighting until his body gave out. Adrenaline, I explained quickly. Their bodies release it under stress. It boosts strength, dulls pain, and lets them push beyond normal limits. Whatever it is, Drell cut in, it makes them dangerous. Stick to training. Observation only. No risks. The shuttle descended through Centauri's skies, cloaked from human sensors. Below us, deep blue oceans and rust-red continents spread out, dotted with precise geometric human construction. We landed 3 kilometers from the colony in a forest of purple leaf trees. The air was thinner but breathable. Gravity was heavier than standard, meaning movement would be tougher. "Comm check," Drell ordered. Everyone confirmed. "Remember," he continued, "humans have weaker senses than most species, but they compensate with technology and intuition. Don't underestimate either." The soldiers moved like shadows through the forest. I tried to imitate their stealth, but every snapped twig made me cringe under Drell's sharp looks. The forest ended suddenly. Ahead was a cleared zone, 500 meters of open land around the settlement. Standard for humans, yes. But something else caught my eye. "Captain," I whispered, pointing. "Look at the soil pattern." He crouched. "What am I seeing?" "The texture and color shift in intervals. The ground has been mined." Drell studied it closely. "Explosives? Or sensors?" "Either. They're prepared for visitors." He signaled the team. "Change of plan. We observe from here with long-range gear." Within minutes, they had set up scanners, thermal imagers, sound amplifiers, even molecular detectors. Their efficiency impressed me. "I'm picking up unusual energy signatures," Zevik reported. "Similar to human defense systems, but more advanced." "Type?" Drell asked. "Unknown. Doesn't match the database." I examined the readings. The energy pulsed irregularly, not the steady flow of human weapons tech. "This isn't primarily a weapon," I said. "It's terraforming equipment." "Terraforming?" Drell frowned. "The planet's already livable." "Yes, but not optimal. They're pushing the atmosphere toward higher oxygen, stable temperatures. They plan to stay long-term." The team exchanged uneasy looks. Permanent human colonies were nearly impossible to uproot. "Zevik, deploy drones," Drell ordered. 3 micro-drones, each no bigger than a thumb, zipped toward the colony. As we waited, I noticed another detail. "Captain, that large reflective roof building in the center. It's not housing or administration. It looks like a research facility." "What kind of research?" "I don't know," I admitted. "But humans don't prioritize science structures early, unless they've found something valuable or dangerous." The drones began sending back clear images. We saw humans working on construction, farming, and security. Ordinary enough, different skin tones, different builds, but their movements were sharp, trained. "These aren't regular colonists," I murmured. Drell nodded grimly. "Military or special operations." Another soldier, Cree, zoomed in on a group unloading equipment. "Those are plasma drills, mining gear." "And those crates," Zevik added, "human weapon containers, heavy artillery." I studied the Ibor images, a knot forming in my stomach. Something didn't add up. Terraforming suggested permanence. Military hardware suggested immediate conflict. "What do you think their goal is?" Drell asked me directly. Before I could answer, Cree's drone sent a new feed. "Captain, you need to see this." The screen showed a massive excavation site at least 100 meters wide, plunging deep into the crust. Humans in protective suits carried containers filled with a glowing substance. "What in the void is that?" Zevik whispered. I leaned closer, scientific curiosity overtaking fear. The substance pulsed blue-green, alive with energy. "That's quantium," I said softly, unable to hide the awe in my voice. "Quantium?" Drell repeated. "Never heard of it." "It's one of the rarest elements in existence, a naturally unstable quantum material that can store and transfer enormous amounts of energy." The dogs moved carefully across the fairgrounds, their noses pressed close to the hard dirt as they followed a trail no human eye could see. The scent led straight toward Highway 34, but once they reached the pavement, the trail disappeared. Handler Jim Crawford, kneeling beside his lead dog Rex, a 7-year-old German shepherd, explained to Sheriff Keller that scent lines can break for many reasons. Car exhaust, weather, or simply too much time passing. The dogs had tracked Marcus's smell for about 200 yards before it vanished at the asphalt road that connected Millfield to the rest of the state. Meanwhile, search teams spread out across the farmland in every direction. Volunteers walked shoulder to shoulder through endless rows of corn, calling Marcus's name until their voices blended into a constant echo rolling over the fields. They checked ditches, old barns, silos, and cattle ponds. Every storage shed and outbuilding within 5 miles of the fairgrounds was opened and searched by people who knew the land better than anyone. The Nebraska State Patrol set up roadblocks on the highways, stopping drivers to show them Marcus's photo and ask if they had seen anything unusual the night before. Local radio stations gave updates every hour. By noon, a television crew from Omaha had arrived, their satellite truck parked awkwardly beside the town's grain elevators. Back at the command post inside the Peterson farmhouse kitchen, Sarah Walsh had not moved since dawn. She sat at the table, folding and unfolding a piece of paper over and over while staring at the phone. She wanted nothing more than to hear it ring with news that Marcus was safe. Her eyes looked empty, as if her whole world had been knocked off balance. Each time a volunteer came back with nothing, the light in her face dimmed a little more. By midday, Sheriff Keller knew she was overseeing the biggest manhunt Millfield had ever seen. And yet, after hours of work, they still had no clear answers about what happened to Marcus Thompson. The first possible lead came at 2:15 p.m. Earl Mitchell, a retired railroad worker known around town as dependable, approached Keller with information that made her pay close attention. He said that around 10:30 p.m. the night before, about 2 miles east of the fairgrounds, he saw someone who looked like Marcus, hitchhiking along Highway 34. The figure appeared briefly in his headlights as he drove home from visiting his sister in Crawford. Keller immediately sent 2 patrol cars to check that stretch of highway and question people living within a 5-mile radius. Mitchell's description matched in some ways: tall, athletic, wearing a light jacket, but it was vague. In the dark, driving 40 miles per hour, he couldn't confirm the face or details of the clothing. At first, it seemed like their first real lead, but then Mitchell's wife Agnes quietly admitted that he had been drinking earlier that evening, and his eyesight wasn't what it once was. When asked again for specifics, Mitchell's story shifted. Maybe the jacket wasn't light but darker. Maybe the person wasn't quite as tall. What started as a hopeful sighting became another dead end. The next development came on Tuesday morning. Doris Hansen, who ran the food concession near the livestock barn, came forward with her own memory. She recalled seeing Marcus around 9 p.m., not long before he told Sarah he'd be right back. But Doris's story added a troubling new piece to the puzzle. She said Marcus hadn't been alone. She believed he was in a heated conversation with someone she couldn't identify in the shadows behind the barn. Doris remembered hearing raised voices, though the carnival noise drowned out the words. What struck her most was that Marcus seemed upset. He was usually calm and respectful, not the type to argue in public. That unusual moment stuck in her mind, but she didn't think much of it until she heard Marcus was missing. Investigators pressed Doris for details. Was the other person male or female? Tall or short? What were they wearing? But she couldn't say for sure. The lighting was poor, and she had been busy serving corn dogs and funnel cake. All she could repeat was that Marcus didn't seem himself. This possible argument pushed investigators to dig deeper into Marcus's personal life. They questioned his teammates, looking for rivalries or resentment. They spoke with ex-girlfriends, asking if jealousy could be a factor. They interviewed Sarah over and over, testing whether their relationship was really as solid as it appeared. Every path led nowhere. Teammates all described Marcus as well-liked and respected. Former girlfriends remembered him kindly. Sarah's answers never wavered. Their relationship was steady, their future plans clear, their last conversation completely ordinary. The more they searched, the clearer it became that Marcus Thompson truly had no enemies. No one had a reason to hurt him or a reason he would want to leave on his own. By Wednesday, the case was drowning in false leads. A truck driver swore he saw Marcus at a rest stop near Grand Island, but security footage showed a different teenager. A clerk in North Platte was sure Marcus bought gas Sunday morning, but the receipt proved the purchase happened before he went missing. A runaway girl in Omaha thought she'd seen him at a youth shelter, but her description didn't match. Wrong height, wrong eyes, wrong voice. Each new tip followed the same painful pattern: hope, careful investigation, then crushing disappointment. The hardest blow came Thursday evening. Diana Thompson, Marcus's mother, was posting another missing flyer at Henderson's Farm Supply when she spotted a tall figure in a leather jacket walking between buildings. Her heart jumped and she ran toward him, shouting Marcus's name. But it wasn't Marcus. It was Jake Morrison wearing his own football jacket. The look of despair that crossed Diana's face that evening stayed with Jake for years. As weeks passed, the search slowed. Winter came early that year. By mid-October, snow covered Millfield and the case files began to gather dust. On a February morning 6 months later, Sheriff Patricia Keller sat in her office staring at 3 cardboard boxes, the sum of everything they knew about September 19, 1998. Inside were conflicting witness statements, photographs of the empty fairgrounds, and evidence bags with cigarette butts and a torn concert ticket that had no link to Marcus. The Nebraska State Patrol had already stepped back, saying they had exhausted their resources. The FBI had been involved for just 11 days before concluding there was no sign of a federal crime. Marcus had vanished from a county fair, leaving no ransom note, no body, no trail, just questions. The calls from reporters stopped. The reward fund, started by the Methodist Church, grew to $12,000 but produced no new leads. Volunteers had long since told their stories, or what they thought they remembered. The dogs were brought back 2 more times, but each time Rex and his handler confirmed what they knew on day 1. The trail ended at Highway 34, as if Marcus had simply vanished into thin air. For Robert Thompson, the months dragged him down. In half a year, he seemed 10 years older. His shoulders slumped under the invisible weight of grief. He left his job on unpaid leave, spending his time organizing searches, paying for gas, and making endless photocopies of missing posters. Many nights, Diana found him sitting in Marcus's room, holding his son's football helmet, staring at college recruitment letters that would never be answered. Diana developed a ritual that friends worried about. Every evening at 9:43 p.m., she drove to Peterson Field, parked exactly where the Ferris wheel had stood, and sat for 32 minutes, the same amount of time between Marcus's last words to Sarah and the fair's closing announcement. It was as if she believed keeping that vigil might somehow undo what had happened. The strain of grief began to weigh heavily on the marriage. Robert wanted to hire private investigators they couldn't afford. Diana wanted to turn to psychics and mediums, hoping for some message from the other side. Both were drained, and neither could comfort the other anymore. Sarah Walsh left Millfield in August 1999. She accepted a scholarship to Iowa State University, a plan she had once abandoned so she could stay close to Marcus. The decision broke her heart, but every corner of Millfield carried his memory. Her parents believed leaving might help her heal, but she carried the weight of his last words with her everywhere. "I'll be right back." The phrase haunted her dreams, a promise that could never be kept. By spring 2000, Sheriff Keller requested early retirement, 6 years ahead of schedule. The Marcus Thompson case had consumed her career and her peace of mind. "The council operates," Harrington replied, "long enough to position our ships around every council homeworld without your knowledge. Long enough to place quantum-linked devices in every major council facility that, at our command, could relocate those facilities straight into the nearest star." My exoskeleton felt as if it were collapsing. "You would commit genocide?" "Unlike the council," Reeves said coldly, "we don't make threats we aren't ready to fulfill. But unlike the council, we prefer peaceful solutions. So here's ours. Effective immediately, Earth joins the Grand Galactic Council as a full member, and we will be leading reforms in how the Council operates. The other species will never accept this, I argued weakly. They already have, Harrington replied. While we've been talking, identical conversations have taken place with every senior ambassador. Check your secure channel. With shaking limbs, I activated the emergency link. One by one, messages came through. Every council ambassador confirmed human ships at their worlds. Everyone had agreed to the terms. This is unprecedented, I said faintly. No species has ever. No one realized humans were the apex species, Reeves said. Not until it was too late. Don't feel too bad, Ambassador. You made the same mistake we humans made for thousands of years, thinking strength is about muscle and bone. While predators grew claws and armor, we grew this. She tapped her temple. We look forward to a productive relationship with the Council, Harrington concluded. Captain Reeves will serve as Earth's ambassador. Treat her with more respect than you showed today. The transmission ended, leaving us staring at the black vessels that still surrounded our ship. What do we do? Vaughn asked, his earlier confidence gone. I looked at my crew. Fear shone in every eye. For the first time in my career, I had no clever reply. No strategy. We adapt, I said finally. The galaxy has a new apex species. And deep in my ancestral instincts, something stirred. A truth older than civilization itself. When a superior predator appears, you either flee or submit. And there was nowhere far enough to flee. 6 galactic standard months after what many now called the humbling, I found myself living a reality I could never have imagined. I was now aide to the human ambassador, Alexander Reeves. The council chambers themselves had been transformed. The old tiered seating, which placed the founding species high above the rest, was gone. In its place stood a single round table, a human idea called round table diplomacy, which Reeves had demanded. Ambassador Krell, Reeves said as we approached the chamber doors. Remind me of today's agenda. I checked my datapad, still unsettled by how fast my career had shifted. The Plovian delegation seeks reparations for mineral extraction. The Zeridians are requesting human technological help with their atmosphere. And the War Collective is protesting the ban on conquering pre-spaceflight civilizations. Reeves nodded thoughtfully. The War were particularly aggressive before, weren't they? Yes, I said. They specialized in enslaving primitive species and harvesting biological compounds. Their economy has collapsed without that trade. How unfortunate for them, Reeves replied with the dry human expression I now recognized as sarcasm. They may have to build a real industry instead of relying on parasitism. We entered the chamber, where representatives from 53 species were already seated. Conversation stopped as Reeves took her place in what had once been the seat of the first speaker. I stood behind her, noting the mixture of fear, resentment, and forced respect directed toward us. The War delegate, General Drax, was the first to rise. His chitinous exoskeleton clicked as he spoke with restrained anger. The War Collective rejects these oppressive regulations, he declared. For 12,000 years, the right to planetary acquisition has been the foundation of galactic growth. The humans have no authority to impose. Point of clarification, Reeves interrupted smoothly. The ban on conquest wasn't imposed unilaterally. It was voted on by the full council. Under duress, Drax hissed, with human warships orbiting every council homeworld. The ships were simply present to ensure transparency, Reeves said, smiling faintly. An uneasy silence followed. Everyone knew the War had been preparing to enslave an aquatic species in the Cygnus sector until humanity stopped them. The War cannot survive under these restrictions, Drax continued, his secondary limbs twitching. Our biochemical refinement depends on compounds found only in the brainstems of sentient beings. Yes, we are aware, Reeves said calmly. Have you considered synthesizing these compounds? We included several options in the technical package. Synthesis is far more expensive than harvesting, Drax shot back. Then perhaps your economic system requires an overhaul, Reeves suggested. On Earth, many industries collapsed once we recognized they were unethical. Those who adapted survived. Sheriff Kyle Morrison hadn't expected to feel hope again. After 26 years of failure, the discovery of the buried bicycle gave investigators something solid to work with. For the first time since Marcus Thompson vanished on that September night, they finally had evidence that could move the case forward. The call from the Nebraska State Patrol Crime Lab came on a Thursday morning in late August, 3 weeks after the bicycle had been shipped to Lincoln for testing. Morrison answered, expecting to hear that the rusted bike had produced nothing useful. Instead, forensic specialist Dr. Rebecca Martinez told him that her team had successfully recovered the bike's serial number using advanced imaging technology. What she said next would completely change everything they thought they knew about Marcus's disappearance. The bicycle was a 1997 Mongoose, originally sold through a sporting goods chain that kept detailed records. Within 48 hours, investigators traced the serial number to a purchase made at Sportmart in North Platte on June 15, 1998, just 3 months before the county fair. The name on the credit card receipt made Morrison's hands shake. Timothy Brennan, age 19. Brennan had worked as a Carnival employee with Midwest Amusements during the 1998 fair season. Yet his name had never appeared in the original files. In the chaos of interviewing dozens of workers and volunteers, he had somehow slipped through the cracks. Records showed he'd been hired only 2 weeks before the Millfield Fair as a general laborer, helping set up rides, clean equipment, and do whatever else needed doing. Dr. Martinez's analysis also revealed chilling details. The bike had not been damaged by weather or time. Someone had intentionally destroyed it. The handlebars had been bent with heavy force, likely using a wrench or similar tool. The seat was broken, the chain had been completely removed, and it wasn't found anywhere near the burial site. Even more disturbing, the lab found organic material embedded in the bike's frame, cotton fibers from denim, and what looked like human hair caught in the spokes. The hair was too degraded for standard DNA, but mitochondrial testing might work if they could compare it with samples from Marcus's relatives. Sheriff Morrison called Diana Thompson's sister, Margaret Walsh, in Denver. Margaret had managed Diana's estate after her death. Though heartbroken, she agreed to provide a DNA sample. The thought that her nephew's disappearance might be tied to a bicycle none of them had ever seen left her in tears. For her, the news ripped open wounds she had spent 26 years trying to manage. The deeper investigators dug into Timothy Brennan's past, the more troubling it looked. In 1998, he had already shown signs of instability. He'd been fired from a Kansas grain elevator for inappropriate behavior toward female coworkers. He'd been arrested twice for public intoxication and once for disorderly conduct in Colorado. Most suspicious of all, he had quit Midwest Amusements right after the Millfield Fair, vanishing without leaving contact details. Now, in 2024, Brennan was 45 years old and living in Pueblo, Colorado. He worked as a maintenance supervisor at a mobile home park. His life on paper looked ordinary. He had married in 2003, divorced in 2011, and never had children. His credit report showed steady employment and no major money problems. But his record included more trouble: another disorderly arrest, a domestic violence complaint later dropped, and a 2019 harassment charge that led to a restraining order from a former girlfriend. Colorado authorities agreed to keep him under watch while Nebraska prepared to question him. The evidence was still circumstantial, but it was strong. Brennan had worked the fair. He had owned the buried bike, and he had left immediately after Marcus vanished. Sheriff Morrison felt a mix of hope and fear. For the first time, they had a real suspect and physical evidence. But reopening the case meant reopening the grief for everyone involved. Families and townspeople would have to relive 1998 and confront the possibility that the truth was even darker than the mystery they had endured for decades. When the time came, Morrison traveled to Pueblo with Detective Maria Santos. In the interview room at the police department, Timothy Brennan sat across from them. He looked worn down, his hair graying, his hands clasped together on the table. Years of carrying a secret had aged him. When Morrison laid out photographs of the recovered bike, Brennan's facade broke. "I've been waiting for this day since 1998, Brennan whispered. "I knew someone would find it eventually. I just didn't think it would take this long." Over the next 4 hours, Brennan told a story both simpler and more tragic than anyone had guessed. On the night of September 19, 1998, he admitted he had been behind the livestock barn smoking marijuana around 9:30. He was trying to avoid his supervisor, who had been giving him a hard time. That's when Marcus walked up, apparently looking for someone. Brennan panicked, thinking the teenager might report him to security. The argument that witness Doris Hansen had reported seeing wasn't a fight between Marcus and a stranger. It had been Brennan, a nervous 19-year-old begging Marcus not to get him fired. Marcus, confused, tried to calm him down, insisting he wasn't there to report anything. But someone else noticed them. Dale Hoffman, the Ferris wheel operator, had worked carnivals for decades. He was suspicious of locals and paranoid about being caught for drinking and drug use on the job. Hoffman had been drinking that night and assumed Marcus was either a thief or some kind of undercover cop. He stormed over and grabbed Marcus by the arm, dragging him toward what he called a security office, actually just a storage trailer behind the midway. Marcus resisted, confused and frightened. During the struggle, his head struck the metal steps of the trailer with a sickening crack. He collapsed, blood pooling beneath his skull. Brennan said the sound haunted him for decades. Hoffman, instantly sobered by what had just happened, started yelling at Brennan to help. Together, they panicked. Hoffman convinced Brennan they had to make it look like Marcus had left the fairgrounds willingly. They loaded him, still breathing, Brennan insisted, onto Brennan's bicycle and wheeled him to Hoffman's truck. They drove him about 20 minutes to an abandoned grain silo. Brennan believed Marcus might still have been alive, but they didn't call for help. Instead, Hoffman insisted they bury him with shovels from Carnival supplies. They returned before dawn. Hoffman then smashed Brennan's bike with a wrench to destroy evidence and buried it at the fairgrounds. He coached Brennan on what to say if investigators asked. The most painful truth was that Marcus might have survived if they had gone to the hospital instead of worrying about their own freedom. Dr. Martinez later confirmed that the head injury, while serious, could have been treated if help had come quickly. Marcus had died not from a plan to kill him, but from two men choosing self-preservation over his life. Dale Hoffman died in 2009 of liver failure, buried in a pauper's cemetery in Texas. He took much of the truth with him, but Brennan's confession included enough detail about the burial site to lead investigators forward. The abandoned grain silo he described had been torn down in 2003 and replaced by a wind farm. Still, ground-penetrating radar detected unusual soil patterns, evidence of earlier digging. Investigators prepared to excavate with archaeological care, turning over the ground inch by inch. For the first time since September 1998, the search for Marcus Thompson was no longer just about questions. It was about finding answers. On the third day of careful digging, investigators finally uncovered the proof they needed to confirm Timothy Brennan's account. Among the soil and debris, they found pieces of denim fabric that matched the clothes Marcus Thompson had been wearing the night he vanished. Even more striking, they uncovered a University of Nebraska recruitment letter that Marcus had carried in his wallet. But the most conclusive discovery came when dental remains were located and later identified by Dr. James Patterson, the Millfield dentist who had treated Marcus since he was a child. After 26 years of uncertainty, the truth about what had happened to Marcus was finally coming into focus. Margaret Walsh, Diana Thompson's sister, was the one who received the heartbreaking phone call. It was a clear October morning, exactly 26 years and 1 month after Marcus disappeared. At 73 years old, Margaret had spent more than half her life living with unanswered questions, carrying the weight of her sister's grief even after Diana had passed away. Now she was told her nephew had been murdered, not out of cold calculation, but because of reckless choices made by two men too scared of punishment to do the right thing. The news left her torn between relief that Marcus had finally been found and anger that his life had ended in such a needless way. Timothy Brennan was formally charged with accessory to manslaughter and failure to report a death. Together, those charges carried a maximum penalty of 12 years in prison, though his cooperation with authorities and the long passage of time meant he would likely face a much lighter sentence. Because of the slow pace of Colorado's extradition process, Brennan remained free for several months before being sent to Nebraska to stand trial for his role in the tragedy that unfolded when he was only 19 years old. For the people of Millfield, the resolution of Marcus Thompson's disappearance hit hard. Their small town was forced to face unsettling questions. How well did they really know the people around them, and what other secrets might be hidden beneath the surface of everyday life? The Methodist Church held a memorial service that drew hundreds of people, Many of them had lived for decades with the haunting question of what became of the boy who left the Ferris wheel one September night and never returned. Sarah Walsh. Now Dr. Sarah Gonzalez came back to Nebraska with her 3 children to attend the service. She struggled to explain to them why she cried for someone they had never known. Standing at Marcus's grave, she finally said goodbye to her first love after 26 years of doubt and waiting. Yet the closure felt bittersweet, bringing answers, but never fully bringing peace. Sheriff Kyle Morrison, who had pushed so hard to reopen the case, found himself thinking about the cruel role of timing. If construction at the Fairgrounds had started earlier, Marcus's remains might have been discovered while his mother was still alive. If Brennan had spoken up years earlier, the family could have been spared decades of painful uncertainty. And if 2 young men had made different choices on that September night in 1998, Marcus would have celebrated his 43rd birthday instead of being remembered as a teenager frozen in time. The case also raised larger questions. How many other families across rural America were living with the same kind of uncertainty? And how many other cold cases might finally be solved only by accident? Investigators from 3 other states reached out to Morrison, asking if Brennan or Dale Hoffman might have had ties to unsolved disappearances in places where their carnival had once traveled. As autumn settled once again over Nebraska, and preparations began for another county fair at Peterson Field, the Marcus Thompson case was officially closed. Legally, there was resolution. Emotionally, however, the wounds would never completely heal. The truth was not the violent predator many had feared, nor the random attack others had suspected, but something far more ordinary and deeply tragic. 2 flawed men making terrible decisions that ended a young life and shattered a family's trust in the safety of their community. The bicycle, buried for 26 years, had finally done its job, not as the disguise or cover-up Dale Hoffman intended, but as the key that unlocked a mystery that haunted a small town for more than a quarter century. Sometimes justice doesn't come from brilliant detective work or cutting-edge science. It comes when the earth is disturbed in just the right place at the right time, forcing long-hidden secrets to finally come into the light. If this heartbreaking story of a family's 26-year search for the truth captured your attention, consider subscribing to hear more true cases where persistence, luck, and time finally bring answers. Share your thoughts on how communities can do more to protect their children, and reflect on what other secrets might still be waiting, buried beneath the quiet surface of small-town America. The closure of Marcus Thompson's case brought both relief and unrest to Millfield. For weeks after the memorial service, conversations at diners, churches, and even the grocery store circled back to the same question: how had Timothy Brennan slipped through the cracks for so long? People shook their heads at the thought that a man who had once been a frightened teenager, hiding behind the carnival rides, now lived an ordinary life, only to face justice after 26 years. Sheriff Kyle Morrison knew the town's frustrations were justified, but he also understood the difficulty of holding together an investigation when the pieces were scattered and the witnesses had moved on with their lives. What the town didn't know was that the case hadn't entirely closed. Investigators were still looking into Dale Hoffman's movements during the years he worked the carnival circuit. Even though he had died in 2009, law enforcement wanted to know if Marcus's death had been an isolated tragedy or if Hoffman had harmed others. Morrison spent long nights combing through old carnival employment records, police files from neighboring states, and any newspaper clippings that mentioned Hoffman's name. Each clue seemed to lead to another dead end, but Morrison couldn't ignore the possibility that Marcus's case might be just one chapter in a darker story. Meanwhile, Margaret Walsh found herself thrust back into the public eye. Reporters came to her Denver home, asking her to reflect on her nephew's life, her sister Diana's years of grief, and how it felt to finally have answers. At first, Margaret welcomed the attention because she wanted Marcus remembered. But after a while, she grew weary of repeating the same lines about closure and justice. Privately, she admitted to Sarah Gonzalez that nothing about the outcome felt like true justice. Marcus was gone. Brennan would likely serve only a fraction of the possible 12 years, and Hoffman had escaped accountability by dying years earlier. "Justice delayed isn't justice at all," she told Sarah one night over tea, her voice trembling with exhaustion. Sarah had her own struggles. The memorial service had stirred old memories she thought she had buried. For weeks she found herself replaying her last conversation with Marcus before the fair. He had been full of hope about the University of Nebraska recruitment letter, talking endlessly about football, scholarships, and the chance to leave their small town behind. Seeing that same letter pulled from the soil decades later crushed her. It was a symbol of all the possibilities that never came true. She told her husband that sometimes she dreamed of Marcus sitting in the stands at one of her children's soccer games, smiling proudly, as though he had become part of their family's life. But when she woke, she had to face the truth. He would never grow older than 17. For Sheriff Morrison, the case also forced him to rethink the very role of law enforcement in small towns. He gave a candid interview to a regional paper, admitting that investigators in 1998 had been overwhelmed by the chaos of the county fair, the flood of witnesses, and the limitations of technology at the time. "We should have done better," he said plainly. "We should have found Brennan. We should have pushed harder." His honesty earned him both respect and criticism. Some praised him for owning up to past mistakes, while others accused him of trying to protect the reputation of his office by shifting blame to investigators who were long retired. Morrison accepted the criticism quietly, believing that the only way to honor Marcus was to tell the truth, even when it hurt. Timothy Brennan, waiting for extradition, also became the subject of endless debate. Some residents saw him as a coward who had chosen silence over saving a boy's life. Others felt sympathy, pointing out that he had been only 19, poor, desperate, and under the control of an older, intimidating carnival worker like Hoffman. When reporters asked him if he felt remorse, Brennan answered softly, "Every day since that night." His lawyer tried to argue that he was not a killer but a young man who had been trapped in a nightmare beyond his control. Still, there was no escaping the fact that he had walked away from a dying teenager without calling for help. As winter approached, the Millfield Historical Society decided to preserve the story of Marcus Thompson in their archives. They collected newspaper articles, photographs, and personal letters, ensuring that future generations would understand what had happened. A plaque was even proposed at the Fairgrounds, near the site where the bicycle had been unearthed. Some thought it was a good idea, a way to remember Marcus's life. Others worried it would forever brand the county fair as the scene of tragedy. At town meetings, voices rose in both support and opposition. In the end, the decision was postponed until emotions cooled. Behind closed doors, investigators continued to trace the carnival's path. Files revealed that in 1996, Hoffman had been questioned about a missing teenager in Oklahoma, though no charges were filed. In 2001, a sheriff in Texas reported rumors that carnival workers had knowledge of another disappearance. Nothing had ever been proven, but the pattern unsettled Morrison. He began to see Marcus's case not only as a local tragedy, but as part of a larger story about transient workers, weak oversight, and the vulnerability of small-town youth who trusted the excitement of the fair. Margaret, despite her grief, took strength from the community's support. At the memorial, hundreds had stood beside her, lighting candles for Marcus. Teachers, coaches, classmates, and even strangers who had only known Marcus through old newspaper articles came to honor him. She told herself that although Marcus had been taken too soon, his memory had left a mark strong enough to outlast the years of silence. She began writing a memoir, not about the crime but about Marcus's childhood, his first touchdown, his clumsy attempts at learning the guitar, and his laugh that could fill a room. "I don't want him remembered only as a victim," she said. By the start of 2024, Brennan was finally transferred to Nebraska to face trial. The courtroom was packed, with locals filling every seat. Reporters set up outside, their cameras capturing the tension in the air. As Brennan walked in wearing shackles, whispers spread through the crowd. Some people wanted to see justice carried out. Others wanted to hear his full story without the filter of investigators. When he spoke, he looked older than his 45 years, worn down by guilt and the weight of lost time. "I can't change what happened," he told the court, "but I can tell the truth." For Millfield, the trial marked not just the end of a case, but the end of an era. The Fairgrounds, once seen as a place of carefree fun, now carried shadows of what had happened there. Yet life continued. Children still laughed on the Ferris wheel. Families still lined up for cotton candy. The fair went on, but always with the reminder that one September night in 1998 had changed everything. Sheriff Morrison later described the case as a lesson in patience and persistence. Secrets can stay hidden a long time, he said, but not forever. The ground gives them up eventually. His words struck a chord with people across Nebraska and beyond, reminding communities that justice might take years, even decades, but it could still come in the end. And so, 26 years after a boy vanished into the night, the truth had finally surfaced. It didn't erase the pain. It didn't bring back the lost years, but it gave a family answers, a town reflection, and the world a reminder that no secret can remain buried forever. As the courtroom fell silent, the jury's verdict was read aloud. Guilty. After 26 long years of unanswered questions, justice had finally spoken. Families wept, townsfolk embraced, and the once haunting whispers of the county fair mystery began to fade into history. Though Marcus could never return, the truth that had been buried with him was no longer hidden. Nebraska's small town carried its scars, but also its closure, proving that even secrets buried deep in the soil cannot remain silent forever.